Hello, Thoughtbad.
Hi there, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, not so bad, not so bad. Um,
Great to have you here.
Pleasure to be here.
Maybe we can just talk about why we're here real quick. You can maybe
Yeah.
introduce yourself and tell us why we're talking.
I'm Thoughtbat. I am an anarchist YouTuber. I delve into mainly political philosophy, but I talk on Discord about philosophy in general and theology. You might have seen me in the politics server if you're on Discord at all. I've also got my own Twitter page where I'm a bit more of a troll, but that's how Twitter works. I've got my own Discord server where I hold regular anarchist roundtable stuff and laughing at fascists, which is always fun. Um, and I found Board Kanak from Liquid Zulu because he recently did a stream with him debating anarcho capitalism. And as I'm a different kind of anarchist, as there's all kinds of weird, wacky anarchists, I think it'd be interesting to present a different flavour of anarchism as opposed to what he was um, exposed to by Liquid Zulu.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, actually, I'm not that active in on Discord, and not at all actually. Not even in my own Discord channel. I basically I think I, I might have to, and I should. Yeah, maybe after this talk, I will write you and ask you where I should hang out to find new guests. I guess it's a good place to find new guests, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. You can always make your own channel in politics and discuss all the topics you want. You get all kinds of crazy people on there.
hmm hmm Okay. Yeah, the way I imagined. So let me just give a quick summary of one thing that we talked about in private, um, which is like usually the way I conduct my streams is that I make some research on a topic and I look at some content creators and I select if I find that there is enough things to talk about or enough like questions or problems that I have with the things that the creator is saying, then I reach out to them. In some cases, I get recommendations. It happened like 2 or 3 times now that the guest has just been recommended, and I then upon like investigate further and look at it. But in this case, basically, you asked me, and now basically, what are we doing? What's the thing that you would like this stream to be like? Would you like to? I think if I'm getting you correctly, you would like to present basically an alternative model of anarchism to the one of Liquid Zulu, and I guess you
Mhm.
would like me to do the same thing that I did with Liquid Zulu, which is trying to understand it and maybe poke some holes in it. Is that fair? Do you think that makes sense?
Yeah, that's very fair. That's precisely what I intended to do.
Awesome.
Provide an alternative model of anarchism and have you attack it with all your might.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then let's go.
Let's go.
Maybe just one thing I would like to ask is to try to separate maybe out points out so that we can go point by point, maybe go from big to small or whatever the order is that you would like to go in, but that it's more of a back and forth. That will be the only thing that I will request. But other than that, you're basically free to do as you like.
Yeah, fantastic. So as I'm presenting an alternative model of anarchism to the one that you had on your show last time, um, you'll find that Liquid Zulu was an anarcho-capitalist. I'm a slightly different kind of anarchist. I am what's called a mutualist anarchist. So it's different type of economic system. So where Liquid Zulu is in favor of capitalist top-down firms and private property being absolute, I'm in favor of more of a usufruct property system, which is more based on use and occupancy, as to avoid class divisions. Other differeces is Liquid Zulu was a strong objectivist, not just in like the Randian sense, but also in a meta-ethical sense. My meta-ethics is error theory. So by error theory, we're not ontologically committed to any moral value, and that means that all moral statements are objectively false. But that's not where we just end the discussion. We go on to fictionalism, I do fictionalism from an egoistic perspective. So the ethical, philosophical side, I'm coming at I'm coming at my worldview from what's called a Stirnerian sense. So it's Max Stirner, who's a egoist from the mid 1800s who wrote a big book called The Ego in Its Own. The Ego in Its Own was such a weird and wonderful text that it pissed off many people, including Karl Marx. And the core thesis of The Ego in Its Own was that, again, objective morality isn't a thing, it's a spook. And so what we actually really want to do is to construct a new way of associating based on self-interest. Politically, how this will pan out is what's called a union of egoists, which is a very loosely defined term. We're basically just talking about free associations for mutual benefit. And I'm going away from the ethics, we go into political philosophy, which I guess is an application of ethics. We get to anti-statism. And we begin with just saying that the state is not ethically necessary because of error theory, because of egoism and such. And if we want to have these kinds of association for mutual benefit, then we want to assess the state and see if it does that correctly, or not correctly, but adequately. And the state carries with it some major problems. Main problem being rational ignorance. That applies to liberal democracies. The problem with rational ignorance is going to be, imagine you've got the United States or you've got the United Kingdom. We'll go with the United Kingdom as a small population size. You've got about 36 million people eligible to vote. You are one voter, and so your vote ultimately has a 1 out of 360 million for the say. 1 out of 36 million for the say, and basically your impact on politics is negligible, and that's not even counting for first past the post and things like that. And so what we have is a politically disinterested society, where people aren't really engaged in political philosophy or political science, and they're not really looking into the manifestos. 75% of people in the United Kingdom can't even name a local MP. And so politics is done mainly through sound bites, and you get things like populism and Donald Trump getting into power, or the rise of reform. You get wacky things like Brexit happening, blah, 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 blah. We're not doing politics properly. So the anarchists have a slightly different alternative to how the state works. Firstly, the state is defined as a monopoly on law enforcement over a given territory, or law determination, I should say. And so the way anarchist law or anarchist conflict resolution would work is we're getting back to a similar kind of thing with Liquid Zulu. It's mainly about he doesn't like it, but it's mainly like a market of legal regimes. Basically, it's called a polycentric model. And so we have free associations and such, whereby you have your legal policies given to you, and you have your rights listed out for you, and your legal firm will protect you in these kinds of instances. And there's problems with that, and I would like to get into addressing those problems as you pick them out. So potential problems, it could be like national defense. How do we do that? R&D funding.
Wait, is that your position? Like, do you agree with that position, that like this model, this thing that you just talked, like the thing that you just outlined out, the thing that you deem is problematic? Yeah. Do you think that's a good, like that's still the best one?
It's got problems. It's not a perfect system. I don't think political philosophy is going to give you any kind of perfect system. But it is your position. But it is my position, yes. Okay. So the polycentric legal model is my position. There's two, in anarchism, you've got two strains of like conflict resolution. Some anarchists I think don't like calling it law, by the way. But I use the word law because I just define law as an enforced social norm. You've got two main models. You've got polycentricity and you've got democratic confederalism. Democratic confederalism is great for small societies and micro societies, but if you want a macro society, I think the polycentric model is more appropriate for it.
Okay, I think I have to admit something. So the thing is, I'm having big difficulties understanding your position.
Mm-hmm.
And I already had that difficulty when I was watching a couple of your videos. I have to admit I didn't have that much time to prepare, but I watched a couple of videos of yours, and I'm really having difficulties like actually finding statements where you actually say this is my position, without basically naming a philosophical term or an author. So for someone who is not really into the topic, that doesn't really mean much. And then even if you dig into the topic, for example, I've heard you say that you're a mutualist, and I've read into mutualism, but even then, since the term is so broad, I have big difficulties really imagining how your society would look like, how your ideal world would look like. Um,
Mhm.
so that's a little bit something similar just happened right now. I still have big difficulties understanding how your position is different from Liquid Zulus. And maybe we can just solve that by me asking a couple of questions. What do you think?
Yeah, that's fine. Ask
Okay.
away.
So first of all, you don't want any state, correct?
That's correct by my
Okay.
definition of state. Yeah.
And by my definition of state or by the usual definition of state?
By how I define it, which is downwind of how Mark Weber would define it. It's
But
basically just a
yeah. But would it be in
state.
if I ask you like do you want a state or do you not want a state? And if you say by my definition I don't want a state, that
Mhm.
implies that there is a definition that probably me or other people would use by which you would want a state. So I'm
Yeah.
curious to find out like what would that be?
Okay, so I define a state as an organization beholden to a monopoly on law determination across a given territory. So it's a
Mhm.
monopolistic system as
But
far as law is concerned.
and how is that
Um,
different from like the usual?
well, there's different. There's some people think a state is like just any kind of government, where it could just be like a group of people deciding what they're going to do, and that would be a state. Like if you had like a tribal system, and they all say, right, okay, we're going to follow this chief, and the chief knows what to do, and he'll tell us what we need to do in order to, I don't know, fish better and things like that. People might call that a state. I think my definition is pretty clear in saying, okay, that's what I'm opposed to, and this is what I'm in favor of.
I mean,
Whereas other kinds of, yeah,
I think your definition is the standard definition, right? Like it's not really doesn't really
mm,
to me right? Like we could say that like it's the
yeah,
standard state definition, like monopoly on violence and
mm,
enforcement of laws. Okay, so
yeah, that's
therefore
fine.
you're against the state in the common
Yeah.
sense of what state means. Um,
Yeah, the only
then
reason why I oh, sorry.
the second question would be, in what way is your society not capitalist?
So the way in which my society is not capitalist is because it doesn't go by the anarcho-capitalist property theory. So the anarcho-capitalist property theory is natural law theory, non-aggression principle, yada yada, where you just have the homestead principle, and then you can pretty much accumulate whatever property you want. You can have a country-sized land mass and say, right, I am the owner of that, and everyone needs to pay rent to me, no matter how many people are living under it. It justifies things like corporate towns. It basically justifies the existence of Monaco, if you think about it. Um, the only difference is taxation would be called rent, whereas my system of property is more based on use and occupancy, whereby the general rule of thumb, it's not a there's continuum problems and such. The general rule of thumb is going to be along the lines of if you use the thing, then you ought to own the thing. Now, there's going to be exceptions to that rule. It's not a perfectly established rule, but we're generally advocating for cooperative enterprise instead of top-down capitalist enterprise. But there is a market there. It's not quite anarcho-communism. There is a market there as well.
Okay, so the main difference is the way we define who owns what, correct?
Yeah, that'll be the main difference. Yeah.
And other than that, there is a market, just like in capitalism.
Yes, there will be a market. It allows for a market, by the way, I should say. We're not principally opposed to a gift economy or a communal system, but the property theory allows for a market to take place, and I think I'd be in favor. I'd be happy with a market taking place.
Okay, and the enforcement of abiding to the rules of property, that in Liquid Zulus or in in the anarcho-capitalist system would be handled by uh by by companies that would be like
Mhm.
security agencies and stuff like that. Is that like similar in your system?
There's similarities. The main difference is mine aren't appealing to any kind of natural law theory. Liquid Zulu will say that this law enforcement agency over here will have this set of rules that they enforce, but some of them would be objectively wrong. Whereas I don't really hold to that. I've got my own subjective ethical framework which I'm going from.
So there is no objective answer to who owns what,
No, there's no objective answer to who owns what. No.
but there is also no collective answer.
Um, Depends, like because I go by legal positivism. So in terms of the collective answer would be whatever the society comes up with, or whatever the market of law comes up with,
But no,
and that would be who owns what in terms of a legal sense.
no, but the market can't help us with that because the market only can operate once we know who owns what, right? Like the market doesn't kick in until we know who owns what. That's when the market starts, right?
So that would be the market of resources, but the market of law enforcement is a different category.
You mean like the security agencies?
Yeah, so it's not just
How?
security agencies. So hold on. So there's a difference between law determination and law enforcement. So law enforcement would be operating upon the determined property theory. The market of law itself, law determination, is what determines the property theory.
What would be law determination if there is no state? Like who would do that?
Yeah, so law determination would be something along the lines of a anarchist federation. So an anarchist federation would be a free association of people who say, right, okay, well, as we interact with each other through this organization, here are our ground rules. So, for example, do not murder. We're not going to murder each other. If you do murder each other, then we're going to impose X, Y, Z cost upon you. But the difference between that and the state is that there's going to be multiple of these operating in a given territory, whereas a state has only one, and that's just the government is determining all the
But
laws across the territory.
but there will be again a private enterprise, like private agency, right?
Yeah, so it'd be a private agency, which is just a mutual association. It's not territorial, so it hasn't. Obviously, we haven't established a property yet. It's a non-territorial organization, so it could literally just be done on a Discord call, or it could be done through postal voting or whatever you want. But
And who
it's just
decides?
an association.
But who decides who's who's in charge? Like which of these associations is in charge if it's not territorial?
Yeah, so there's no particular organization in charge per se. It's going to
Like
be a horizontal.
of a given question of who owns what.
Yeah, so who owns what would be pretty much dependent on um, the contracts made between contracts and agreements made between federations, or more easily determined within those federations.
Wait, we don't have a federation yet. Like if we
Yes, we
don't
do.
have I mean, yeah, but who would like let's say I want an object, you want the same object, we both want that object. Like
Mhm.
who would determine who owns that object? How would we determine that?
So we determine who owns the object through the law of the day, or the law du jour that the members are
Okay. Okay.
subscribed to.
Okay. So before we even own anything, so before there
Mhm,
is any form of ownership, we're just naked
mhm,
on an island. We
mhm.
first basically create what exactly?
Well, if it's just me and you on an island,
No, it's
well,
like me and you and 50 other people.
me, you, 50 other people, we're on
Yeah.
an island. Well, we'll do what politics does. We discuss things together. Um, we put forward examples or frameworks for property, perhaps, and then the recommended property theory will come as a result of those negotiations. It's like
Yeah,
it's more
but
like contractarian system.
yeah, what gives legitimacy to one organization like that? Like there could be like three,
Nothing.
right? But there could
Well,
be
look,
like three, right,
mhm,
on the island because you
yeah.
said that there is like competition, right?
Mhm,
And then me and you were fighting over a stick, and my agency says yes, and your agency says no. It
mhm.
says this belongs to Kenneck, and the other one says this belongs to Thoughtbat.
Mhm.
So what's the answer there?
So the answer in terms of
So basic. So sorry,
the lack
just
of it.
one more thing. Just
Okay.
one more thing. Also, in your system, basically, since there is no objective answer to the question, since this comes
Mhm,
with consensus, it's actually the we're not only talking about what would happen practically, but we're actually asking who owns it, like who's the legitimate owner of that stick, right?
mhm. Yeah. So
So
when we
yeah,
sort I want to ask what you mean by legitimate there. So you're asking me what counts as legitimate. I want to know what the
the,
definition of
the,
legitimate you're using.
the difference between possession and ownership. So I have this I found the stick, okay, and
Mhm,
you took the stick from me, right? And now we're in
mhm,
a conflict, and now the stick is in your hand. So, but
mhm,
you're not the owner of the stick, but you're in possession of the stick, right? In my like from a
yeah.
let's for example, we can look at different property theories and different property like different property theories, and we can
Mhm.
distinguish like who is the who just possesses the stick and who is the actual owner, who's the legitimate owner.
Yeah, in terms so ownership there being in the legal sense, yeah?
Y-
Just for
Yeah.
clarity.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so when you say
In
who
what other
decides,
sense?
oh,
In what other sense would you have ownership other than legal?
there'll be legal or there'll be ethical. So there's property the act. So there's three different kinds of property I tend to hear. There's property the legal, which is what the law says you own. Property the ethical, which is what you should be allowed to own. And then there's property the actual, which is it's a possible relationship of like a Max Stirner type of property where it's like who is actually in possession of it.
Okay,
So
I'm not sure if I would agree with these distinctions, but I feel like we would be sidetracked by that. So my question would be now:
mhm.
how would we find out who is the owner of the stick?
So when we say find out, we're not discovering who owns a stick because
Hmm.
obviously it's not a natural law theory.
Sure,
We're not discovering the law.
sure,
We're inventing the law. We're inventing the theory.
sure, sure. How would we
Um,
determine?
so how do we determine it? So well, it's because we've got a situation where it's like 50 people on a desert island. It's from a legal point of view, it's literally however that society itself organizes itself and whatever law system it spits out.
That's
It could be done for a king or whatever.
but that's
So that's
what I'm actually asking. Like there's two different
mhm,
organizations, two different like people that came like two different groups that came up with the law, and now the
mhm.
question is which organization do we trust, which organization is the correct one,
Well, there isn't a correct one, so there's no such thing as a correct organization.
which one
Um,
applies.
well, in a situation where there is just absolutely no agreement whatsoever between these two parties, or who decides it could be in a legal sense, it's going to be the victor in any given conflict.
But then it's about violence basically.
Well, yeah, but that's how law works. So
Yeah,
a
I
law is
agree,
an enforced social norm.
I agree, but that would basically be might makes right.
Might makes legal right. So yeah, it's not a normative theory; it's a descriptive theory.
So you think that then that would mean that me stealing an object, and if there is no other no one to stop me, and that would basically make it legally mine, and there is no such thing as theft in that sense. Like in your system,
Mhm.
there might
That,
be there's only theft that basically fails to be theft, but other than that, there is no not real theft, right?
yeah, in that situation, yeah. So
Do
prior
you
to
think
any
that's
kind of
yeah?
prior to any kind of anarcho-federationalism, prior to any kind of those institutions, then yeah, there's no law there. It's
Wait, no. Also, in your also if we have multiple institutions that just so wait, like it could just be the case that one institution just agrees with me taking the stick from you, right?
mhm. Yeah. So don't forget the hypothetical, as we've already baked in the lack of agreement between these parties, right? So we've baked that into the hypothetical. So there's no agreement that can be made, and so
But if you
therefore there's
but
no there's no
if
there's
you
no
don't
like
but if you
answer to the
don't
question.
think that this is an
Mhm.
objective answer, isn't like the disagreement baked into the fact that you say that it's not objective?
Is a disagreement baked into the fact I say it's not objective? Well, yeah, there is a disagreement. There's
Like
potential for disagreement,
yeah, if you
but
say it is not objective, like if there would if like it is already implicitly in there that there will be disagreement.
yes, that's what law is there for. It's
But
a conflict resolution system.
then basically our the thing that we try to fix, which is like conflict resolution between two parties wanting the same object, has
Mhm.
not been solved. It has just been elevated to more violence, basically, to a bigger forms
Yeah,
of violence, to two bigger forms of violence, and I don't
yeah.
see how that solved our problem.
Well, it hasn't. Yeah, so it hasn't. So we've already baked into the situation. The parties are not agreeing, so we haven't got any agreement.
No,
We
we
haven't
didn't
got a
bake it.
property law.
We had to
Oh
bake
no,
it
we
into
have.
the
Hold on.
we had to bake it in there because
Yeah.
it's already baked in your assumption that it's subjective, and that means there will be disagreement.
No. Potential. So it's baked in. It's baked into the subjectivity of it that there's potential for disagreement. But there's also potential for agreement, and this is going to be agreement between not just me versus you, but also agreement between like my legal firm, your legal firm. Right. So if my legal firm, your legal firm have already got an agreement, a preempted agreement on how we resolve these disputes, that's how a property law can come into being. However, in the situation where my legal firm and your legal firm do not and cannot agree, then there is no answer to the solution. There's no answer to the problem. Because when we disagree, that is implied hypothetically that there is no solution.
I mean, my understanding is that it is consensus, and consensus means that we basically vote on it, right? But since these are two different entities, two separate entities, since you're talking about a non-monopolistic way of doing it, you're basically
Mhm.
creating consensus in one group, creating consensus in the other group, but then you basically these two clash and there cannot be any common consensus. So that will be the only way that I could see a conflict being resolved if it's not objective. So basically we have two choices, what's right and what's so what we don't like is might makes right, right? That's bad, right? We agree on that. That's the reason why we
What do you
even
mean that's bad?
engage. I mean, the whole reason why we even bother doing that, like creating a council and like making conflict resolution and talking about all of the things that we're talking about right now. The only reason we do that is because we think that might makes right is bad. Because if we would have nothing, like no NAP, no council, no democracy, no state, no nothing, right? It would just be might makes right, correct?
I think it's necessarily might makes right under any political system. Like might makes in the legal sense of right, or the legal sense of property, might will always make the property right,
Yeah, but I disagree. Like
no
I
matter what
disagree.
system you have.
I disagree with that because I think that consensus makes right in our current society. That's the thing that makes it right. It's not might.
Are you sure?
It's yeah.
So without
That will
might,
be
so
my assent.
if the consensus opinion doesn't have might,
Yeah,
and a minority opinion has the might, which do you think would win out there in
it's
that
a
given
it's a
in that given
might is a
system?
is a necessary condition, but it's not a sufficient condition.
What do you mean it's not a sufficient condition?
Like in order to make it right, you would not only need might, you would also need something else. But might always has to be there.
Yeah, might has to be there, right?
But
So without
you
might,
need
you don't
more
have
than
it.
that in order for us to say, okay, that's cool.
Yeah, you need
right?
some kind of social recognition, I suppose, if you're going to
I
have a
mean,
legal system.
in my sense, like Liquid Zulu, he thinks there is an objective answer, right? That's
Hmm.
his idea, like natural law. My
Hmm.
idea is that it is consensus, i.e., subjective but collective subjectivism, which makes it to a certain extent less subjective. So you have arbitrary, like if we have like everybody decides like the way they want would be arbitrary. But the moment where we basically on one hand we have like arbitrary, on the other hand we have like objectivism, like natural law and stuff like that, and somewhere in between is like uh voting on it, right?
So you say voting on it. So what I'm getting here is a constructivist view on how ethics works.
I don't care.
Is that correct?
Yeah. I guess, but I try to just keep things simple in order for everybody to understand. We don't have to put any label on it, and but I think everybody knows what I mean, right? So
Mhm.
basically, and you basically somewhere in the middle, but it's not consensus. And I feel like where you are right now is any, you haven't moved away from it being arbitrary. So you basically not engaging with the problem at hand that we're trying to fix. Like if you're saying that the solution you're proposing is ethically ethically you haven't improved anything. You could have just not done
Mm.
anything and let
We
Crusoe and
haven't talked about
Friday,
ethics yet.
and you could have let Crusoe and Friday just kill each other, and we wouldn't be any better
Mhm.
off. Like, right?
Yeah, but we haven't talked about ethics yet. We've talked about only political application. So, yeah, so if you ask me questions about political application, I'm going to give you the might makes right thing. If
Wait,
you want to ask me about ethics,
why are you trying to create your system? You're trying to create your system because you think it's better than it without the system, right? Like you do
mhm.
think that your system being in place is better than your system not being in place, right?
Yeah.
And to what extent better? Like in a utilitarian way, where you think it's more lives being saved and more pleasurable for the people in there? Is that the way you think it's better? I don't think so.
No, no. In
Yeah,
terms
that's
of conflict
I didn't think
minimization.
that. I think it's an ethical point that you're making. You think it's ethically better to have your system in place, correct?
So hold on. So when we say ethically better, and what I'm talking about is like this is meeting my preferences. Is achieving my preferred goals, and my preferred goals would be conflict minimization. So in that sense, that would be the ethical thrust of what I'm suggesting.
So
But
you
so far, we
think
haven't
so
actually
it
talked
is
about we
but
haven't
it
talked
is
about the
then.
ethics yet.
No, we're talking about the ethics the whole time. That's the thing that we're talking about basically.
No,
So
sorry, hold on. I resent that. That's not true. We were talking about political application of the law. We've been talking about law all this time. How do we have a legal property right forming out of a society, right? So we
when you
haven't
say
we haven't got normative statements yet. We've only got descriptive statements. A
when you
normative
say
statement will be a completely different conversation.
your system it is better with your system being in place, what do you mean?
Yep.
What do you
So
mean
when I
when
say
you
my
say that?
system would be better, I'm going by
Then no
my
system being
my.
there.
Hold on. Sorry.
I mean, when you say your system is better than no system being there, right?
Mhm.
What do you mean when you say that?
So when I say that, I'm saying it's a better achieving my goal of conflict minimization,
And why do you want conflict minimalization?
so I can get on with my life without conflict.
So it is okay. So you're just trying to minimize the practical. So it is utilitarian, but just a selfish utilitarianism. Like you want
That's what egoism's called, but yeah.
sure. Um, so you want so it is utilitarianism to a
Well,
certain. So sorry.
utilitarianism is the
Okay.
hold on. It's consequentialism,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
utilitarianism is particularly the principle of utility maxim, and
Okay.
it's not that.
Okay. Okay. So basically, you want to maximize the the positive experience that you have, right? And you think
Yeah,
this would maximize your uh your experience the most, right?
yeah.
Got you. Okay. And now what I'm saying is that you like, and why would that be? Because you wouldn't want to live in a world where you could just be the unlucky weak person that could get his head smashed in with a bat, right? Because some other guy just wants your stuff, right?
Yeah, we want to have an orderly means of conflict resolution. Yeah.
So we are back at might makes right is bad, right? Like that was the whole reason why we got on this tangent, was because I asked you might makes right is bad, and then you said no. But we now back at might makes right is
No,
bad
hold on,
for
hold
you,
on.
for your
So
selfish
hold on.
interests.
So might makes right is one thing. We've got illegalism as the other thing, whereas like there's a society absent any given legal system. Might makes right is applicable in both. So might makes right in terms of the legal sense, not the ethical sense, because might doesn't reify right. That would be false. Might makes right is true in both legal systems and non-legal systems. So I'm preferring a given legal system, the polycentric legal system, as opposed to of a legal system and as opposed to monopolized legal system. But might makes right is applicable to each of them.
I didn't understand that, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay.
But
So might makes right is applicable to
just
any
maybe
kind of legal
my
system and
confusion.
absence thereof.
But are you responding to my confusion? Because I'm not sure. Because so my confusion is, I asked you if might make like can we agree that might makes right is bad, and you said
No.
no. But
Yeah.
you said that the reason why you want to implement your system is because you don't want to just be the victim of might makes right.
No, I said I
But
don't want
but I
to be the
asked you, I
victim
said
of.
you don't want to be the victim of being the weaker person and then getting your head
Yeah.
smashed in, which is exactly
Yeah.
might makes right.
No, not necessarily. So might makes right is only saying that to have a legal system, to have any given legal right, it needs to have enforcement of some kind, right? Um, so that applies to any legal system and also any non-legal system. So, like, if I was to just smash your head in and take all your stuff,
What is a
then that would
non-legal
be
system?
where there's no laws. There's no law within a given society. It's a lawless society by definition.
Okay, so can you repeat the last thing that you said?
Yeah, so in a lawless society, we've just got people running around like just doing whatever they want to each other
Yeah,
without any kind of recourse,
yeah.
um, and that would be might makes right
Okay.
in like the positivistic sense, because it's just saying, well, whatever happens happens, but whatever happens is broadly applicable to all kinds of systems. So on the legal side, you
I
can have
don't
this
understand that.
polycentric side.
Why is that
Okay,
why is that applicable to all systems? Like in the
so might yeah.
it,
So when
we
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 say right here, might makes right. Right is in the legal sense of the word, not the ethical sense. Legal sense. So might makes right would apply to any given legal system because to have a legal system requires some means of enforcement. You need to have some might in order to impose a right. Say might
I feel
makes right
like
is
I feel
bad.
like no, I'm not getting what you're saying. Like I don't even know what the difference is here that you're making between legal and ethical. So you say that you might like your understanding of it being legal is completely separated of it being ethical, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so and how do you define? We don't even know how you define your ethics, like where your ethics come from.
Yeah,
So
because
I have
we haven't talked
completely,
about it yet.
yeah, I know, but I don't know why we're even talking about this because what I asked you, like I don't even know why we're talking. There is no reason why we should talk about this because
I'm responding to your questions.
no, my question is why are you producing the system that you're producing to get what? And your answer is to have a better, like to be just from a selfish perspective of being at a safer place and not basically having uh might impose on my rights, correct?
No, no, hold on. That's where you're That's where you're adding the might makes right thing. So I've not
Yeah,
assented to. I'm trying to avoid might makes right. Might makes right is unavoidable. What I'm trying to have is a more harmonious society where we just There's fewer instances of conflict than more instances of conflict. So a society which I'm living in is more preferable to me if there's fewer instances of conflict than if there's more instances of conflict.
So you just bothered with the amount of conflicts that would happen, right? So you
Not
think that
just not just. There's other. I think for the sake of simplicity, I can just go with that as a starting point. Because obviously, there's going to be nuances in terms of like, okay, well, what's worse, a nuclear bomb going off, or some people just stealing pennies from each other? Like, okay, there's also intensity there as well. Like, I'll probably choose people stealing pennies from each other, like 10 instances of theft over one instance of a nuclear bomb going off. But the rule of thumb, as I said before, is we want to minimize the conflicts, and we also want to minimize their intensity and such. But that's a different problem to solve.
you
But
want to
that can only be
minimize the
done.
amount of conflict, but minimizing the amount of conflict would, for example, be that there is one monopoly that just dictates what's happening and what's not happening.
What
Like
makes
to
you
have
say
a
that?
king, like to if you have like if you say that basically enforcement is the thing that decides over a conflict, right? Then you basically have, if you have not a monopoly, that would increase the amount of conflicts that could occur, right?
Why would that be the case?
Because we end up with the problem that the moment where me and you have a disagreement and we give it up to the two agencies that are supposed to be there to resolve the conflict, but they're in disagreement, then we would not have a solved conflict. We would still end up with a conflict.
Yeah, but you baked
Whereas
into that hypothetical that there is no agreement, that there is no law. So I'm only going to answer the hypothetical where there is no agreement on that, right? You haven't asked me yet how an agreement could be established, and is it
between
more
the two
likely to be
agencies,
established? Because
between the two agencies,
I can do the same hypothetical play with you and say, well, what if we have a situation where these two political parties can't agree, and they will never agree, and they eventually just have to turn to conflict to solve a given problem. I bake in the dysfunction of law into the hypothetical, and then bang, I win.
no,
But
in our
that's
society
the
it's
issue.
all no, but the issue is the difference is between political parties and your system is that we all vote in one pool. It's one institution, and we vote in
Oh,
one go. So basically,
okay.
whoever wins the majority in everything in the whole country,
Yeah.
that's the person that makes the law, and that's the person that decides what's correct and what's not.
So what if
Right?
51% of people? What if 51% of people vote on X law,
Wait,
and
just
49% of people hold on? And what if 49% of people vote against X law,
yeah.
and those 49% of people don't consent at all in any capacity to be governed by said law? They will be resistant to that law
But they have already
in all
agreed.
circumstances.
But they have already previously agreed to do that
No,
before
they've
the.
stopped. They've stopped agreeing. No, in
Yeah,
this,
but
there's no agreement.
no, but then they
I've
basically.
taken. Sorry, no. I'm going to have to do the same as you did to me. I'm going to take the possibility for agreement out of the hypothetical. So you have to deal with
I
that now.
wait. What are you taking out?
So the possibility for agreement, right? So I'm giving you a situation where there is no agreement within this population over this given law
Which
enforcement.
is always the case. Yeah, which is always the case in every democratic election. There will be barely 51% that is in one camp, right?
And I'm giving you a hypothetical situation.
Yeah, I'm saying that even in reality, this is the case. What you're describing
I'm
is
not
the
asking you
case.
about reality. I'm asking you about the hypothetical situation.
Oh,
There's no agreement on this given law in this population. One saying we will fight to the death to oppose this law, even though they're 49%.
yeah.
51% is saying we'll fight to the death to impose this law.
But that's really easy
What's the
because
solution?
because they have agreed
No, they
before.
haven't. There's no agreement.
But then we wouldn't vote. Then we would actually have what you have. We would have anarchy then, right? Like there
Well,
would be
yeah.
the. But yeah, that's
I'm
the
taking
thing.
agreement out. So
But that's
here's the
but
problem with your hypothetical, though. So the problem with the hypothetical that you gave me is that you took agreement out, agreement between the two federations out of off the table. And now I'm posing the same thing back to you, and I'm taking the possibility for agreement out of the hypothetical, and boom, we've got this dysfunctional society. So
But
is this an argument against
two
statism or
parties.
what?
There is no what you don't understand. There is no two pools of consensus in my system. No. It's just
here and
no.
49% there.
No. The consensus is that 51% have voted in favor of it, and that makes the consensus to be like that. That is the consensus. The election is the consensus. It's one consensus that we're reaching by reaching the 51%.
How do you define consensus?
It's not two parties. It's we vote on it.
How do you define consensus?
Like we vote on it.
Oh, so consensus is just voting.
Yes.
Okay, how does that solve the problem then?
That's a means of determining what's right. That's my means of determining what's right.
What, in a legal sense?
What's legal is that's my understanding. My understanding of legality is basically as a necessary condition we have might, and as a sufficient condition we have consensus, which is basically which makes it not arbitrary, basically, right?
So you agree that might makes right is so your position is might makes right is bad.
Yes, because might makes right would imply that might is a sufficient condition to make something legal. But it's not a sufficient condition, it's a necessary condition.
Right, but you said to me when you were asking me about my system that I want to avoid being the weaker party and have my head bashed in. So if 51%,
if I understand you correctly,
51%. Hold on. If 51% of people vote to bash your head in, and then that's now a consensus rule, I don't see why that's much better than just having my head bashed in without the consensus.
If you're just looking at, if you think that you're
no. Can you explain to me why it's better to have your head bashed in with consensus than have your head bashed in without consensus?
I mean, it's the difference between the death penalty and murder, right?
No, it's not. No, it's not. So okay, what do you mean? It's a difference between the death penalty and murder. So you'd
think
rather be
I think the death penalty
have your head bashed in than illegally have your head bashed in.
Wait, first of all, First of all, yes. Secondly, I'm not even arguing from that frame. Like you're the one who is taking the justification. Like your idea of where the law comes from is egoism, right? That's not my idea. So wait. I'm not running away. That's not my understanding of. I don't have to define.
Whoa! I've asked you,
bro.
Why? Hold on. I've asked you why you think it's better to have your head bashed in legally than illegally, right? And you've told me.
Are you asking me?
It's the difference between the death. Hold on. It's the difference between the death penalty and being killed randomly, murdered. If you're killed legally, that means there's no such legal recourse against the people who killed you, right? So if 51% of your consensus-based government say, we're going to kill Bord Kanak and we're going to do it legally, there's no case against, but you can't sue the government there, right? Because if someone kills you illegally, at least there's the potential for that murderer to be sued, and there's a disincentive for that person to be sued. So I'd actually rather be killed illegally than legally, because at least the murderer can be punished legally. Get it?
Your whole justification for what you want society to look like.
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing an answer to the question.
Do you want to have a conversation, bro?
No, I'd like you to answer the question.
What is the question? You didn't ask me a question. You just stated that you would prefer. No, you didn't ask a question.
I will restate the question. Was
then ask the question.
Why would you rather be killed legally than illegally?
I didn't say I would be rather. I said it's better. In my framework, in my understanding, it is better.
Tell me why it's better then.
Because there is consensus on what should happen, and the arbitrariness is lower in one case versus the other. And I think that in my my axiom, can you please let me finish my answer? Okay. Come on, let's be a little bit civilized here. It's not.
Go ahead.
It's not, my axiom basically is that arbitrariness is bad. That's not good. And that's why might makes right is bad, because it's arbitrary.
Okay.
And
I'm gonna okay.
can you let me
Can we
please
stop you there?
finish? No, I
Can
need
I
to.
stop you there?
No, I want to fucking finish what I'm
Because
saying.
there's so many
No, I
actually
want to finish what I'm saying. You're asking me a
finish what
question.
you're saying, but we're gonna go back to it.
You're insisting on
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Me
Say what
answering
you're gonna say.
your
I'll come
interesting
back to it, mate.
question, and then
Go
let
ahead.
me answer.
Go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
think that arbitrary is bad. Okay,
Okay.
and I think someone being killed arbitrarily is worse than someone getting killed semi-arbitrarily. Okay, that's my answer. And now I want to say what I wanted to say before that is
Go ahead.
that you even asking me about what I would prefer as an individual, if how I would feel about being killed by a mob or being killed by a random guy, uh, that question has no importance whatsoever with my for my system. Like I don't make my system isn't justified by my egoistic feelings about it, right? Yours is. So even the question makes absolutely no sense, because it's you are claiming that egoism is basically the, or not, you're claiming, you're actually like, you're justifying the system with your egoistic your maximization of your own pleasures and life, right? So but that's not my the way I construct my system, the way I justify my system. Okay, that's it.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to ask you now again, which system is ethically better? Now I'm going to give you a situation, one hypothetical island. Oh, where are you going?
Just getting some water, sorry.
All right, okay, I'll carry on when you come back.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okie dokie. So you got two desert islands. One has 0 laws. There's no laws on this island. Another one has a law which says bored kanak gets killed. First island, no one kills you. But there's no law. No one kills you. Second island, you get killed, and there's a law saying you get killed. There's no ethical justification for either of them in any kind of whatever ethical system that you hold to. There's no justification given for your murder or your death in
Can
Island
we
2.
not talk about ethical,
Which
because we
island is
haven't
ethically better?
went there yet?
No. So when you said better, hold on. So you distinguish better from what you would prefer. Okay, you can do that. That's fine. But I thought with better, you were talking about ethical better.
To me, ethical better, these are like my system being better and ethical better are the same thing. For you, apparently it's not. That's what you're claiming. I think it
No,
is for you as well, but before, like 20 minutes ago, you claimed that it's not the same thing for you. So when I asked you the reason why you're putting your system in place is because you think it's ethically better, you said no, that's not the case.
no. Hold on. So I'm saying we're talking about. We went from legal right, and I distinguished legal right from ethical right. Ethical right is going to be determined according to my egoist fictionalism. But I want to get. I still want to get
Ethical,
back to
right?
this island
Sorry,
hypothetical. I still want to get back to
ethical.
this island
I,
hypothetical.
I want to understand
Bro,
what you're saying, man. I don't
you
understand
complained a lot
anything.
about me interrupting you,
But I don't
right?
understand you.
Okay, but I didn't understand you before because you were making all these kinds of assumptions. I wanted to test them and clarify them, and you stopped me from interrupting you. So
Bro, you
what
did
game are we
no,
going to
no,
play?
no, no. You said I'm
What
not
game are we
gonna
going to
let you
play?
go there. I'm not gonna let you go there. I'm not gonna let you go there. It had nothing to do with understanding. You were
Uh-huh.
understanding perfectly fine what I was saying. I'm asking you,
Uh-huh.
why are we not talking about? You basically said that it is a difference between you wanting a system and you thinking that's ethically better. You basically said it's just the
No,
reason
there
why you
isn't.
put the justification for your system that you
No,
put in
wrong.
place. What?
Wrong. The
What's wrong?
difference is between legal and ethical. The difference is not between what I would prefer and ethical, because what I prefer is the ethical one, right? Or rather, what the ethical one is
Okay,
defined by what I would prefer, right? So there's no difference. So clarifying, there's
great,
no difference between my preference and what I
awesome.
consider to be the ethical system. Now,
Awesome.
that's different to the legal, how laws work. Now, back to the island hypothetical.
Wait, I asked you
Consent,
before.
we're not doing, no, we're not doing that. Wait.
You just
So
ran
back
away
to the
from.
island. I asked you that island hypothetical,
Yeah,
and we haven't got an answer, bro.
sure.
Right? So the island hypothetical, you're killed with consensus, and the other island hypothetical, there's no consensus, you don't get killed. Which is better?
Better in what sense? Better for me?
Your sense, because you said before, oh, I'm talking about what's better. Your sense, you used the word better. So
I
which
mean,
one?
I think ethically, like when I say better, I usually mean that in the ethical sense. Otherwise, I
Okay, so
would
the
say
ethical
better for
sense.
me, right?
So in
Like
your ethical sense,
obviously it's not better for me, but when we're talking better in the ethical sense, I
mhm.
think that where there is a consensus, either it's the same, or where there is a consensus, it is better. It's the same question as before, right? Oh wait, is
Would
in
I
the
be
one
correct?
island? In the one island, is there like somebody else getting killed, or just no one is getting killed?
No one's getting killed.
No
Everyone's
one
just
is
getting
getting
along,
killed.
but there's no law there. There's
Okay,
no
this
law. There's no consensus. They just get along all happily and lovely without any given legal system.
sorry, wait. So the killing is not happening because of because of what? Can you repeat the hypothetical? So on that,
Yeah.
that's not even a hypothetical about the law. Then it's just about facts of
Yeah.
the matter.
So
Like,
the
do you think?
hypothetical is this:
Yeah,
there's two islands.
yeah,
Island one,
yeah,
there's no laws, but everyone just gets along anyway. Everyone just gets along. There's no conflicts,
yeah,
but there's no legal system.
yeah,
Island 2 does have a legal system, but
yeah,
one of the laws in that legal system is Bord Kanak gets killed.
yeah.
Which of these islands is better?
Which of these islands is better? The one where no one is getting killed is better.
Great. So, therefore, consensus is not the thing that makes things better.
It's
Makes things better is the lack of conflict.
bro,
Don't know why you're laughing. You
because
just
because
contradicted yourself. I should be the one laughing right now, mate.
then go ahead and laugh.
Okay, I'm waiting for
Do you
the
understand? Do you understand?
reconciliation.
Do you understand what I mean when I say that
No.
consensus makes something less arbitrary?
Yeah.
Do you
Makes
understand
them
that?
less arbitrary, and you said
Do
arbitrary is bad.
yeah? Do you agree with that?
I don't think I do because that's not my standard,
Okay, sure. So
right? So
why? So you would disagree? So you would say that it's not less arbitrary of us finding like one person that wants to murder you. I think it's more arbitrary if one person decides to murder you versus 10 people voting on if you should get murdered or not. I would presume that it is less arbitrary if these 10 people get into consensus to murder you. I would say that this is a less arbitrary act. Would you disagree with that?
well, I'm not quite sure what arbitrary means in this sense, but like
Random,
all I'm asking really is
like
like,
a whim,
does the consensus
a whim.
whim?
Yeah.
So the whim is there's no given reason why they're arriving at that consensus, right? Is that what you mean?
If I mean, if you don't count like whims as reasons, and if you don't count, yeah,
Okay, so now it's not so much consensus on your view. Your view's gone down to that consensus needs to be ethically backed somehow.
why is it not consensus? I'm saying that consensus makes the thing less arbitrary, makes the act less
Okay,
arbitrary, makes every
right.
act
Okay,
less arbitrary. That's my understanding. Do you
right. And
disagree with
so,
that?
well, I don't know if I disagree with that or not.
Why
But
not? Then
I'm
let's talk
trying.
about it. What's your problem?
The issue is
What makes you what makes you not be able to answer that question? Then
well,
let's talk about it.
so because I still don't know what was meant by arbitrary, right? But the problem is we're disagreeing on this idea that consensus is morally relevant, right?
Please,
So
man, stop that. Let's have a fruitful conversation, please.
I
Like
am
that.
trying to do that,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
but
I
you
don't
want
want you to
to
go
talk.
away from that. If you tell me that you don't know what arbitrary is, I feel like we have
Yeah.
a problem.
Well, I don't know what you're meaning by arbitrary.
What do you
So,
mean by arbitrary? What do
so
you
when
what?
I think of arbitrary,
Yeah. What is your
I'm thinking
definition of
of
arbitrary?
yeah. So without reasoning or grounding or justification, right? So if I just say
Mm-hmm.
X ought to be the case, and there's no reason why I'm saying X ought to be the case.
Mm-hmm. And so
That's it.
basically,
That's what arbitrary means.
it could be anything else. Like randomness would be part of it, right?
Um, Not sure. I just go with the lack of justification part.
Bro,
That's
I
what it
feel
means to
like
be
I
arbitrary.
feel like you don't want to answer the question, and I don't think it's that difficult
I
of a
did
question. Like,
answer the hold on. I did answer the question.
but you're
Right?
saying
You
you
said,
don't
"Is
know
it
what
to do with
arbitrary
randomness?"
means.
Right?
That's why you
No,
can't answer my
I
question.
don't know what you mean by arbitrary in this sense, right?
What
Because
do you mean by arbitrary, man? I'm asking you.
I've
What do you
told you,
mean?
I'm saying it
Okay,
lacks
by your
justification.
definition. Okay, by your
Yeah,
definition. By your
yeah. So an
lack of.
arbitrary norm,
Yeah.
an arbitrary norm would be a norm without any kind of ethical justification. There's no PPC for that conclusion, right?
Wait,
It's just
arbitrary is not
I just
only
say
an
X is the case.
arbitrary is not
Hmm?
only an ethical thing. Like arbitrary is an adjective that we can use on things that are not ethical. That it's just is a way more general thing, right? Would you agree? Arbitrary is not
Yeah,
bound to
it
ethical
applies to other
questions.
cases. Yeah, it applies to other
Yeah,
cases, but
so
the
you can't
ethical
use that in the
ethically relevant
definition.
side,
No, you
of
can't use
course we
that
can,
in the
because we're talking
definition.
about. Of course we can, because we're talking about the ethical. We're
If it's
talking about which
broader,
system is better.
but I'm asking you what the word means, and if it's a
Yeah.
broader thing than ethical, it can't come up in the definition.
So you ask me what arbitrary means in general?
Bro, I think most people have a understanding of what arbitrary means. Whim,
Right.
arbitrary, random. We can like these are
Yeah.
words that usually people understand, right? You say you don't understand it, which is fine, and now we can talk about it. And you say you do understand, but you don't know how I use it. So I'm asking you to define it, but the way you define it is in contradiction to the way you understand arbitrary, because you say you put ethical in the definition of arbitrary, while stating at the same time that arbitrary is something that is more general than ethical questions, so it can't come up in a definition.
Right. So I was under the impression that we're talking about the ethics and which system would be better, right? And when you said, okay,
I was under
this
the
in this
impression that we're
situation,
talking about what arbitrary means, what to
right?
you,
Yeah.
and I want to
And
question what
arbitrary
it
was a
means to
word
you.
used in the ethical conversation,
No,
was it
I
not?
want to know what arbitrary in general means to you.
Without reason, without cause, without
Without
reason.
without reason, without cause.
Yeah.
Okay, and do you think, with that definition in mind, do you think that there is more reason and more cause if there is a consensus of 100 people or 1 million people reaching a consensus versus one person just doing something? So
No.
one person, okay, you don't think that there is more reason, more cause behind that?
No.
Okay, and I think most people would agree that there is more reason and more cause behind an
But
action
most
of
people
a
would be wrong.
collective. Sure, now we can talk about that. That is interesting, actually, that you would bite that bullet. So you, because since like the way you want your system to happen, what do you want the two institutions? How do you want them to reach a decision? You want them to vote, right? Why would that, if it's the same, if
To
it's the
vote.
same amount of arbitrariness, why would you get the two institutions to do that for you, to vote for you?
What do you mean? What do you mean? Where did I mention voting?
I thought you did, but maybe you didn't.
No,
So I
I
think
didn't say
you.
voting. Mate. I
Okay,
didn't say
so
voting.
how would they, like, okay, then let's go back to there. How would they
Okay.
come up with a decision on whether I should own the stick or you should own the stick?
Okay, so how they can come to an agreement is going to be through two laws, well, two processes, I should say, not laws, because that could get confusing. First off, we've got the process of constant dealings. So, process of
Wait,
constant dealings is where,
bro, just
oh
sorry, one more thing.
goodness,
Sorry, before we go
I was about
there.
to explain it.
Yeah, but I think you're lying, because you said
You think I'm
before.
lying?
Yeah, because you said before. I just remembered that you said before that your
Hmm.
system would be just as democratic, with the difference, like it would be democratic elections basically of one of governments, but it would be multiple ones, so there would not be a monopoly. That's what you
I
said
didn't say
before. No, you didn't
that. I
say
didn't
that.
say that.
Okay, then I made that
I
up.
didn't. I didn't.
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I think
We can watch it back. I'm
why?
gonna watch it back,
Yeah,
but maybe I did.
that's fine, my friend. But
Maybe
like,
I'm
hold
I'm
on. So
wrong, and then I apologize. But that's what I think I
okay.
remember.
So what I did say is that there's democratic confederalism as an alternative to polycentric law, which works for micro societies, but
Mhm.
polycentric law is better for macro societies. So that's the only time I've mentioned democracy so far.
But why would you want that for polycentric societies? Why would you want that for them if it's the same as one person just deciding? Why would you prefer that? Since you think that it's you just stated that you think it's the same amount of arbitrariness whether one person decides or whether there is a consensus between multiple people voting on it democratically.
Yeah, because I don't think arbitrary versus non-arbitrary is necessarily morally relevant.
Yeah, but why would you say it's bad?
That's why I asked the hypothetical between the islands.
Okay, right? But why would a democratically elected decision be better than a non-democratically elected where just one person decides? Why would that be better?
I don't hold that it would be better.
But you proposed it as a system for polycentric societies. That's what you said, right?
Why do you keep asking me about that? I've not mentioned democracy. I've said I've got problems with democracy.
Okay, gotcha. So you don't want election to be a part of any form. Like you didn't propose, and you never proposed in this whole conversation. You never proposed elections to be a way of finding out what the correct law is. Okay, then I'm not understanding you. That could be
okay. That's fine, but I've never said elections or democracy. What I might have said, I might have described democratic confederalism as an anarchistic alternative to polycentric law. Right, but I go with polycentric law. Now,
what does democratic mean?
Federations,
doesn't that mean elections?
Well, democratic means rule by all.
By elections, right?
It might mean elections. It might mean referendums. It could be participatory democracy.
What are referendums?
Well, the referendums is when you
vote, right?
You find a consensus. Yeah, when you vote, but that's different to an election, right? Hold on, you know there's a difference between an election and a referendum, don't you?
Bro, we're talking about consensus, right?
Yeah. So there's different ways you attain consensus.
Yeah, but it's both consensus still. Like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, they're two different types of attaining what's called consensus.
Yeah, but I'm arguing for consensus, and you're saying that consensus doesn't make something less arbitrary, therefore doesn't make something less bad.
Yeah, I agree. And you've already agreed with that yourself.
Why do you even make the difference between election and referendum? It doesn't matter. It's all consensus. It's all consensus. It's all consensus-based decision making.
Hold on.
I'm getting some water.
What do you think? Okay, but I want you to tell me what you think I'm saying to you, because I think you're getting confused with whatever's going on.
At this point, to be honest, I don't know. I think it's very you're being very slippery in what your position is. I think, to be very honest, because I asked, like, the whole reason why we're even talking about this is that I asked you why you want your system. I believe. Let me just state my position. I believe that your way of basically elevating the conflict that me and you have over a scarce good, you elevate that to be dealt with by other agencies, that by two agencies, 2 or more, or 5. It must be 5, like it's already implicitly baked in your system that it must be more than one. So that's the first necessary condition for a conflict. And the second necessary condition for a conflict is that there is possibility for a disagreement, which is baked into the fact that you say that it's subjective, it's not objective. So there will be disagreement there. So we have the two conditions for disagreement met. And therefore, the question is that I think that there will be conflict between these two or more agencies that now deal with the conflict that me and you had, right? Mm-hmm. And my understanding is that this, first of all, my understanding was that the agencies themselves are, I thought that's what you said. Maybe I misunderstood you, but yeah, that these agencies come to a consensus decision
agreement,
to a consensus agreement, but not with each other, but within them.
Why are you saying consensus?
No, that was the understanding. No, that was the understanding that. Okay, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
I'm not talking about consensus. I'm not talking about referendums, voting. I've never mentioned those words. I'm saying agreement between these two federations.
I'm telling you how I understood your system. Okay.
Okay,
because you said you talked about democratic democratic processes in these institutions, in these agencies. That's what you were talking about.
Yeah.
That is, for me, democratic is consensus. That's my understanding of consensus.
Consensus. Okay, so
is that not the case for you? Is that no, not the two agencies with each other, not the two agencies with each other. I'm saying, like, my understanding was that the agencies within them come to an agreement by democratic processes. That was the thing that I heard from you. Maybe I misunderstood you. You can correct me on that. But even if they come up with something else, okay, what then? How do they come up with other than consensus? Like, how do they determine what's right and what's not? One agency.
So one agency would simply just be the policy of the agency, right? So I've got my legal agency. I run this legal agency myself, and I say, right, Board Canuck, I'm going to defend you against murder, against theft, against this, that, the other. And so you say, oh, I've thought about, I need some help. Come and help me. So I go and help you, and I defend you against murderers and thieves and whatnot. Right? So that's just the policy that I'm offering you, right? And you come to me, and I do it for you. And then there's a problem where there's a dispute over this given property between you and someone else, and you've got different agencies, and different agencies either have to agree or they disagree, right? So the agreement between the agencies.
Who has to either agree or disagree? You as the agency?
The agencies make agreements between each other.
So the agency, you are just one person. You don't have like an army of people.
Yeah, so that was just me just explaining how the thing works. So I own this agency, and I just come out to you, and based on the policies I've offered you.
I choose my agency beforehand. Basically, I come up. I come on this island, and I have to choose an agency in order to get any form of legal protection, right?
That'd be one way of doing it.
I have to pay you as well, right?
Not necessarily, but it might be a payment system.
You do it for free?
Yeah.
But you see how, like, you always like say, like, yeah, maybe not.
Because I'm not holding because I don't hold to a given.
But that makes it really difficult to understand what you're saying. Like that makes it really difficult to even imagine what you're saying, right?
Well, this is the thing, right? So with anarchism, you've got all kinds of different systems and experimental organizations that can possibly occur, right? So it's not necessarily entailed that there's a payment system or there's not a payment system. It's not necessarily entailed that these are individually internally democratic or not. If
it's not a payment system, why would you do that for me?
Maybe I'm invested in helping the community. Maybe it's a religious organization or something. I don't know. The reasons aren't necessary. Right? It's just possible that it can happen. Maybe there's a charity or a mutual aid society, or as I mentioned before, I'm not opposed to gift economies and such. There's all kinds of
that. Like
there's all kinds of. Yeah.
Do you see how that makes it like? It makes it really difficult to even imagine your society. Like you having to resort to religion and charity and all of that stuff. Like no one basically would. Like we don't even know what that is. Like we don't even really know what that is in your system, right? Like
I gave you potential reasons why someone would do that.
Yeah, but we don't know. Like you in your reason, there are new institutions baked in where you don't even know how these institutions would look like under your system.
Yeah, I don't think it's.
So you using that to explain, but you using that to explain it makes like I'm asking you, what is X? And the X in this case is your institution, right? Your system, or let's make it more clear. I'm asking you, what is the police, the executive, the legislative in your system, right? Something we already have in our system. What is it in your system, in your ideal society? And you then then using other things that exists in our current society to explain something, one of these three things in your new society, makes no sense because we don't even know what the equivalent of these things are in your new system, right? So it makes it nearly impossible. It makes it nearly impossible to even imagine like what your system would look like.
Yeah, all that's entailed by what I've said so far is the lack of monopoly. Right? So you've got multiple legal regimes, i.e., federations, interacting and making agreements between each other. That's all that's entailed. The internal workings of these federations.
Why would anyone defend you? Why would anyone defend you? Go ahead.
The internal workings of these federations is not entailed by anything I've said. So it could be it's a religious institution. It could be it's an internally democratic institution. It could be it's a company or some kind of firm. It could be any of them. The whole point is the only defining characteristics is it's a voluntary association and non-monopolistic and non-territorial, I guess. That's all the entailments I'm talking about, and it solves the problem of rational ignorance.
I'm really, I don't know how to conduct this conversation. Like I really have difficulties.
What am I doing wrong?
I mean, what you're doing wrong is you're not ready to take any stances. That's the problem, right? Like if I ask you what is the interest of the person that defends you, and you say maybe it's that, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, but I'm like, yeah, what if it's not that? And then you don't have that? Like, right? And so that's a big problem. Like, and then we don't even know how it would look like if you're not ready to take any stances on that, right? Like, what would be a church, for example? You're saying, okay, maybe it's a religion. So basically, we have to rely on people all getting religious, or can we just go with the first way, which would be that there is a monetary compensation, right?
Well, they can both coexist.
Sure, they could both coexist, but
that's why I'm not taking any given position, because there's a multitude of reasons why people would do it.
Okay.
As an anarchist, I'm not supposed to take positions on this. I'm not proposing a model which is detailed down to the last minute detail. Right? This is the institution. This is the institutional incentive.
I have no idea how this would look like.
That's the question.
Like you're saying that in order for something, like there is so many questions. There is so many open questions here right now.
Ask one.
So first of all, like in order to be able to enforce any of the laws, like in order to be able to enforce anything as an agency, you can't be just one person, right? You have to have some form of superiority in terms of violence. That's the first thing. So how would you get that? That would be the first question. The second question would be, in this violence, like this is like a bundle of people basically that come together and are able, like it could just be 2 or 3, right? In our example, to make it simple, right? It could just be 3 people that are basically protecting you from the other people on the island, right? But it would have to be big enough in order to ensure that you can enforce at least a minimum amount of cases, right? So already there, you would have to reach a consensus between these 4, 5, 10 people that are protecting you. These 5 to 10 people would have to have some form of structure where they decide what's right and what's not, in what cases they do what. And if it's just one person at the top who is basically deciding what's good and what's not, then the question would be, why is that the person, right? Like, what's the legitimacy for that person? So, and then now we get to, okay, how would that process work? Consensus you've already thrown away, because that basically to you is not any better than one person just deciding, right? It would not increase, the morality of what's happening. Like, it would not make anything any better.
As you've agreed.
No, I did disagree with that vehemently. I think that consensus.
No, you agreed with that.
I told you that I think murder in consensus is better. Remember?
No, you didn't. Actually, you contradicted that point when I asked you the island hypothetical. So, and you told me that the island without the legal system, without consensus, where no one gets murdered, is better than the island with consensus, but you do get murdered.
But in both cases, in that case, not in both cases people are being murdered. Obviously, people not be getting murdered is better. But
consensus is irrelevant.
Consensus makes
it's irrelevant. No, that fucks your entire argument up. It's abolished. It's done with.
Okay.
Because if you're telling me that the island with no consensus is better than the island with consensus, then stop telling me that consensus makes it better, because it fucking doesn't. Stop contradicting yourself. I'm getting pissed off if you sat there thinking you're winning the conversation when you're making blatant contradictions like that.
Okay. Do you want to have this conversation? Do you want to even continue? Like I don't know. I don't know what you're getting pissed at. It makes absolutely no sense what you're saying. Like
so
I told you, consensus makes an act better.
Does it?
Okay? And then that's what I said. Yeah. So if you have murder,
yeah,
without consensus, it is worse than murder with consensus. That's what I'm saying. Okay? And you then saying, yeah, but what about the island without murder? And what about the island with murder but with consensus? Makes no sense whatsoever, because you're not comparing two equal things. Therefore, we can't even like make any comparison between consensus and non-consensus, because in one case, no one is getting murdered.
Right. But when we're talking about which society is better, I'm saying to you, consensus means jack shit.
Okay.
And you've agreed. So consensus, arbitrary, doesn't matter. What matters is the safety of the people living there. Now, consensus doesn't make a given action better than the other, right? I think murder in one, murder in the other is the same, consensus or no consensus. In fact, I would even give more credence to say that the lack of consensus behind your murder is better for you to be killed illegally, because that means there's at least some recourse against the person who murdered you. If you're killed with consensus, there's no recourse for the people who murdered you.
I know that you think that.
No, I'm saying that to you, right?
I know.
So if you're saying, so I don't see a single reason why consensus makes an action better. It also doesn't make an action of me shaking your hand better or worse than me murdering
you. Do you know why we're talking about this again? Because
you contradicted yourself.
No. Do you know why?
I'm reminding you contradicted
Do you know
yourself.
how we got here? Like just for the second time now? Do you know that?
Because you were telling me.
Because I'm explaining you.
Things better when you already agreed it doesn't.
No, I'm just telling you that you don't think that consensus makes anything better, and you've just agreed to that. No, I do.
Neither do you.
I do. I do think that.
No, you don't. It doesn't make the islands better. Right? Okay.
Do you think that there is a difference? Do you think that there is a difference between? Okay, you left.